All right, friends and neighbors, welcome back. This is the 21st episode of the studio class at Low Brass U, where we welcome you. We hope you are safe and healthy and happy in the year of 2022. I'm your co-host, Connor, and here with us today, back from our hiatus, is our fearless leader, Zach.
How's it going, everybody? Sorry for the late start, but I suppose, late start is better than not having it for the last, 5 weeks? 4 weeks?
It's better than nothing, right? You gotta take what you can get in 2022. We're all just glad that we're here.
Right. The December is just a hard month. It's always a hard month. It's always been a hard month. And it's hard for different reasons at different points in the month. You have the stressful things of ending the semester, whether you're on the student side, the teacher side, or both. And then you have the gigging craziness sometimes. Then you also have the family things in there. And then you have the times where you just don't want to do anything. So we made it past December, and we should be back to normal. I'm hoping for, 52 episodes this year. I'm hoping to really just, take care of business.
Clean 52 in 2022?
I mean, we haven't missed one yet. So
that's true. We're 1 for 1.
Logic would dictate that we are going to, get all 52 in. We're at 100%. Why would it change?
We are currently an object in motion.
Right.
We
shall stay in motion. And yes, there is an intro now. There actually has been an intro for, I would say, a pretty good amount of time, maybe September or October.
It's an early bird special. You really gotta get in on the ground floor when these live streams pop up.
Right. I think that's probably the issue, is that most people aren't watching at that point in time, because mostly, how could you? Because I don't usually start the stream early, and even if the stream does start before things, you don't really want to watch that anyway. So you kind of just will check back in later. But yes, there is an intro. I hope the intro works okay. I've never really double checked it. So we're going to hope that the intro is just as awesome as it was in my head and in, Adobe Premiere. So we'll hope for the best with all of that. Also, your 2022 background is pretty much lost on everyone because of how much screen real estate you get.
Oh, well, that's okay. I feel festive just having twinkling lights behind me.
Yeah.
Making the impression that I am maybe in Times Square.
Yeah. I mean,
if that's really where you want to be.
Right, and you've got all the key. We are now sponsored by Kia.
Yeah, evidently.
But yeah, so our first show of 2022. I think we've got at least one interesting topic. Well, I'm sure some other interesting topics will arise, as they tend to. But the topic that Connor and I talked on the phone earlier this week, and we talked about bringing this up on stream. And so the first topic is going to be, what instrument should I buy next? And I think that we maybe have slightly talked about it on stream, but I'm not sure. But I had made the mental decision, and the finances of it were going to work out, that I was going to get a bass trombone at the end of next summer, or this summer now.
This coming summer.
Summer 2022, probably looking like July. And so what I was kind of thinking is that I would go to a shop, probably Shires is where I was leaning, and go pick out a horn, and film all of that and have kind of that be a whole thing. And now I'm kind of waffling on that idea a little bit.
Why are you waffling on that idea a little bit?
I'm waffling on that idea because I have a bass trombone, and a bass trombone that I'm not planning on selling. And I play more tenor trombone and tuba than I do bass trombone in the real world. So do I need a top tier premium bass trombone? Maybe not.
That'd be cool.
Not that there's not necessarily things wrong with my bass trombone. I just think that there are bass trombones that suits my needs better. But if my needs is to just put it on a stand in the background, I think it's off camera, but just to have it in the room, I suppose any bass trombone will do.
Sure.
Because the alternative would be to probably wait a little bit longer, maybe early 2023, and buy something a little bit more ridiculous, like a contrabass trombone, which would definitely be, be a fun thing.
It would certainly be fun. And that's kind of the crux of this decision here, is that both of these instruments, bass trombones are great, but you already have one. So it's like, how much more value does upgrading a bass trombone do for you versus the contrabass trombone that doesn't exist yet in your repertoire? And then the question is, it's like, is having a contrabass trombone cooler than the improvement of having a regular, nicer bass trombone? And if we're worried about the ones and zeros on the other side of it, as far as like return on the investment, that's tricky either way. There's not a whole lot of contrabass trombone work out there, but to be fair, I have not broken into the contrabass trombone scene, so maybe some people are just swimming in it and they just don't tell me. So it's possible.
Right. That's definitely an angle. Is that it's really hard to get contrabass trombone work when you don't own a contrabass trombone.
It is. Yeah, it's one of those things, like, people who know don't talk, and people who talk don't know.
Right.
Maybe,
No, I think that's definitely a lot of contrabass trombone land for sure.
Keep that in hushed tones. If you invested all the money into owning a contrabass trombone, and you invested the time in practicing it, and then you were fortunate enough to land some sort of paid work with a contrabass trombone, you'd probably keep those cards close to your chest, and I would not fault anybody for doing that.
Right.
But that being said, it would be cool to have one.
Right, and then the other angle too is a bass trumpet, which probably is slightly more practical, and probably about, maybe it's just slightly more expensive than like a Shire's bass trombone.
Let's peel this back for a second. Especially for me, as someone who I like cool. Like, I don't know if it's offensive to call a contrabass trombone kind of like a tangential auxiliary sort of instrument. I don't know if that would offend contrabass trombone artists.
Probably not too many people in America, but
it's not something that I know a lot about. And I also admittedly don't know a ton about what the day in the life of a bass trumpeter looks like. So maybe for those of us keeping score at home, where do you play a contrabass trombone? What do you see yourself doing? Where is Zach sitting with this contrabass trombone, and where is Zach sitting and playing with this bass trumpet?
So I think that they find themselves in similar situations, but the percentage of where they are in those situations is maybe different. For me, bass trumpet would be more valuable in the real world, meaning that there are more pieces in the symphonic orchestral literature than there are contrabass trombone pieces. For example, like Janacek's Sinfonietta gets played a lot. That's a pretty common opener sort of piece for an orchestral concert, which, if memory serves me right, I hope I'm not saying this incorrectly, but I believe it has 2 bass trumpets and 2 euphoniums in it, in addition to the normal section.
That's nice.
So, thinking about how when insert whatever orchestra nearby, you plays that, maybe they need another person, and if you're the person with a bass trumpet, maybe that's you. So I think that kind of has some value in that sort of realm. There are other orchestral pieces. Rite of Spring has technically a bass trumpet part, although I would say it's loosely a bass trumpet part, but it does get played, and people generally play it on bass trumpet. But it's really kind of leaning from the trumpet side of things. I can't remember if there are 3 or 4 trumpet parts on that piece, but whichever the lowest trumpet part is, it's kind of like you play trumpet for a while, then you play bass trumpet for a few notes, theoretically.
Just the ones you absolutely have to.
Right. So it's not really a super involved thing, but kind of that's kind of what I'm thinking as being the pro of a bass trumpet. Also, a lot of Wagner opera work has bass trumpet.
Yeah.
That's another thing. So, playing in an opera orchestra or something like that, that could be helpful. There definitely is bass trumpet in the real world, although it's not common. But I would say it's probably more common in like the physical world than contrabass trombone.
I see. And I want to take a step back and talk about a term that you said in the middle of that caught my interest, which was when you were talking about the parts assigned in that sinfonietta, you said technically bass trumpet.
I said that for Rite of Spring, technically bass trumpet.
Rite of Spring, yeah. That's kind of like my fear with instruments like these is like, how often do these pieces that like commonly get programmed that have these instruments in them get played by other things where like, they just make a personnel call and say, well, we'll cover it elsewhere.
Right. I would say it definitely happens. Your top tier orchestras, say the top, I don't know, 30 plus orchestras in the United States, they're going to play what instrument's on the part.
Mm-hmm.
Now, who plays that might be a little bit interesting. Whether they just have a trombone player, just like, hey, you got to go deal with this.
Right, go figure it out. Congratulations, you're in the trumpet section.
The practice rooms are back there. Go ahead and we'll write out the fingerings for you and good luck. Exactly again how all that kind of translates into the real world can vary for sure. But essentially, I think when there's bass trumpet, it almost always is played on bass trumpet in higher tier orchestras. Contrabass trombone, I don't think is quite the same thing.
I see. That's the one. I feel like that technically word. It's like, well,
right.
Your bass trombone player might say, I can play all those notes, and then whoever's doing the contracting for the symphony might say, well, if it's already doable with this person that's already on our payroll, that's nice. Why don't we just have him play those notes?
Right. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's still a numbers game. Very rarely with either bass trumpet or contrabass trombone is there going to be a situation where there's not, usually, I guess the way that I'm thinking of it is there's always going to be an increase of personnel when those instruments come up. Mm-hmm. I can't think of a time where there's contrabass trombone, but there are only 3 trombones in the section.
Right, that's not, I don't, never seen that before.
Usually it's 4 trombones and the contrabass is that 4th. Kind of same thing with bass trumpet. It's not usual that, you have 2 trombones and bass trumpet and kind of that scenario. But you're right, especially with contrabass trombone, there are plenty of scenarios where, you just play it on bass trombone because realistically, for most people, most situations, the contrabass trombone is almost more trouble than it's worth. If it's not an instrument that whoever is playing it plays it every day, are they going to play in tune? Are they going to play with a perfect sound on every note? Are they going to, have some issue because it's not their normal instrument? And especially with contrabass trombone, while technically there are notes that it can play that a bass trombone cannot, to my knowledge, none of those notes are written in any kind of mainstream large ensemble work.
Right.
Because if we think about it, the bass trombone, in its somewhat normal configuration of having an F attachment and a G flat attachment, your lowest note before false tones is going to be the lowest B flat on the piano. So are we assuming that the contrabass trombone is going to play lower than that?
Right.
I would doubt it. And in a lot of instances, it's really not that low and impractical for the bass trombone. I think at the end of the day, it's a concept of sound more than anything.
It's a timbre issue of like, we want the sound of this thing that is this big making this note.
Right. We want bigger trombones. Right. So at the end of the day, you're definitely not wrong that maybe nobody uses it. I know with like the Dallas Opera, for example, a lot of times they just don't use contrabass trombone. They just use bass trombone. And especially in that sort of scenario, you're in a pit. How would anybody know? Is anyone going to really pay attention? What do you mean they're going to know? They're going to know. So yeah, that's definitely somewhat of a concern. my kind of counter to that and why the contrabass trombone is the more exciting of the two. One, I think it's the more exciting of the two because it's bigger.
It is cool.
I think we come across bass trumpets a little bit more often than we do contrabass trombones. So the thinking that I have is that in recorded movie music, that sort of stuff, there's a little bit more contrabass trombone chimbasso sort of action going on.
Right. We love that sound right now. That is in vogue.
Yes, in vogue. I was about to say that is the I guess it's two words, right? Yeah. That's the phrase that really comes to mind when thinking about the contra. So with that kind of thing in mind, that's better, probably. And it's also, that's the most expensive of these three instruments, so getting it earlier makes the other ones maybe a little bit softer, a little bit easier to justify later.
Sure.
Maybe I should justify it while I can.
Yeah.
Not that there are any super big plans, but, life changes, and sometimes your instrument budget just isn't as high as it used to be for various reasons.
It happens.
So that's kind of a thought process. But then, especially with contrabass trombone, we have to talk price.
Yeah.
Because that's the scary portion of that. So, a Shire's bass trombone, just because that's kind of our metric right now. Shire's bass trombone, they don't have prices on their website, but $6,000 something is kind of what we're looking at these days.
That's spicy meatball.
Yeah, probably about 6,500. Somewhere in there, probably no more than 7,000 at least. The bass trumpet that I'm strongly considering, if I were to choose that next, is the Alexander bass trumpet, which seems to be more or less the kind of gold standard. People definitely play a few different instruments, but that's one that comes up a lot, and that's probably the one that's imitated the most, which I think that's kind of another good metric for that.
Right.
So thinking about the bass trumpet being, I think they have prices from like a year or two ago on their website, and I think it's like 5,500 euros. So again, we have to do that calculation, but probably a little bit more expensive. I haven't looked into all the details of getting that from, you'd have to basically import it from Germany. What does that look like? How much more money does that add? It's going to add more. Just how much more?
Oh, yeah.
So thinking about that sort of thing, but probably somewhere 7 something, probably low 7s if I had to guess. I'm not really sure exactly. Let's do a little Euro double check and see how much 5,500 euros to USD. So right now that's $6,200.
Okay.
So not a big difference.
No.
And let's see. Let's do a 1 year. It's definitely not a bad time to buy.
Maybe.
I guess it's been since early 20 or mid 2020 that it was a better time to buy.
I see.
But yeah, that's a whole game in itself, essentially.
Right. What's the dollar doing?
Right. But then, so on top of that, then we have the concern of, we have whatever taxes, tariffs, those sorts of things that might get applied to it. So I imagine that's going to end up being around $7,000. So still pretty close to a Shire's bass trombone, if not, let's call them the same. I think functionally they're the same.
I see.
And then contrabass trombone is where we get into a little bit different territory. If money were no object, I'd probably go with a tine. Pull that up. Again, because that's kind of what I see as being the pretty much the standard instrument. Let's see if I can do music close up. Nope. Of course it's not set up. That would be too easy. So something happened since our stream a month ago.
Things have happened.
But yeah, so looking at the only one that I know that's for sale in the United States right now is the one at Houghton Horns, which they've fluctuated on this price a little bit, and it's much higher than I last saw it. It is currently maybe they don't have it. It says available on back order and in stock. So maybe they sold the other one, and that's why this one is the highest price, because they probably won't restock it, because I think it took them forever to sell that other one. But this is saying $18,895 with no case. Ooh. It looks like.
Humana.
Or you can add a second case, but it's. I feel like if it says add the case for $1,145, so we're looking at $20,000.
Wow.
So that's a lot, and that's I would say that's the one I see the most among top tier professionals. That's what, I don't know the exact variant or anything, because there are a few different variants from Tyne for contrabass trombones, but that's what Brian Hecht plays. I think Denson Paul Pollard plays one now. You definitely see them. That's what both the universities that I've attended had. I would consider that to be somewhat of the standard, which is a lot.
That is a lot.
So $20,000 for that. So we're saying that is that worth 3 times the value of a bass trombone? If we're thinking about it that way, it's like I could probably get a bass trombone, a bass trumpet, and maybe even a reasonably priced used tuba for all that same price.
Right.
But more realistically, what I'd probably be thinking about is getting a Marcus Lecter contrabass trombone, which is a small German maker. He's just a person, and I think that his comes in at just under $10,000, so nine something. So it's when we look at it that sort of angle, that's pretty reasonable.
Oh yeah.
Comparatively to $20,000, half price, not bad.
Not bad at all.
So in that sort of regard, I think if that were the price, I mean, that one definitely there's like probably two that get into the United States every year. So the likelihood of getting it when you want to get it is a little bit unlikely. But I would say money-wise, probably could be looking into getting that spring of 2023. So in that regard, and maybe sooner, if everybody just, watches all of the Low Brass U content on YouTube and just, rewatches everything and the money just starts pouring in, then I guess we'd have to do it.
Right.
So,
no other choice.
Right. So how about this? I'll say that if I make $1 million on YouTube, I'll buy both of them. How about that?
Sure, yeah.
I'll buy whatever you guys want.
We'll fly the whole fan base out. Everyone's
right.
coming. Trombones for everyone.
Right. You get a contrabass trombone. You get a contrabass trombone.
Now, an interesting counter argument has been thrown in the chat that I want to throw out.
Yes, we've been neglecting it.
We've been neglecting the chat. Why not just buy a sousaphone?
Buy a sousaphone, and do you know what this other one is, Connor?
A Helicon?
Yeah. Do you know what that is?
I have no idea what that is.
I think we've talked about it on stream. It's going to take me too long to fix the screen issue, but go ahead.
Tell me what it is.
Yeah, so a Helicon is more or less a sousaphone. I believe it came first, and it's basically a sousaphone but with a tuba bell. So the sousaphone bell is kind of like a front bell baritone sort of style where it kind of does this, and so this would be. It almost looks just like a pretty standard tuba bell just soldered onto a circular body.
That's not what Toho plays, is it?
Yes.
Oh, that thing's awesome.
Yes. So it sounds a little bit more like a tuba, but it's not. But it's somewhere in between the two, I would say. But yeah, there definitely are a couple makers that still make them, but they have fallen way out of popular instruments. But they do exist.
Cool. That's a shame.
I would like both of them. I definitely know that I need a sousaphone at some point.
I've looked into it. They were more expensive than I was willing to like I'm not ready to get into the sousaphone game. I don't know. I feel like I'd be more quick to make that decision if I actually knew how to play the tuba well. But
you'd be able to figure out the sousaphone. Even us tuba players are just trying to figure out the sousaphone sometimes.
But I was looking and I was thinking like I can get just some cheap fiberglass thing that lived its whole life in a marching band. It's going to be so cheap. I'm going to pay like $500 for this horn. There was nothing like that.
Right.
It was horrible.
And that's the thing.
I'm looking in the wrong places.
Yeah, everyone that I know has gotten like a crazy deal on their sousaphone. And it's just
that's what you always hear. And I was like, oh, cool. So there's just people trying to give these away. Like there's no demand.
Right. Like, oh, yeah, this high school, they were about to throw out this vintage Con 20K and they let me take it. Like they were taking it out to the dumpster anyway. And it's just like, what?
Right. Like, that must be nice.
So I just realized that you've had a mouse on your face the entire time.
Oh, that's okay. I deserve it.
Maybe so. And just like right smack dab on your nose.
I'm looking at it now. So I've got like the 20-second delay.
It'll be gone in a second. Okay. But yeah, I definitely agree that it's kind of prohibitively. I'm not prohibitively expensive, but it's a decision. And the thing that I always come back to with the sousaphone is, do I want to play that many sousaphone gigs to make that back? And I think the answer is always no.
I don't. Yeah, it's kind of like that would be a lot, And also, I feel like once you become established as like the sousaphone person, it's like if you're not careful, like your calendar could really fill up very quickly with like a lot of sousaphone stuff, and then before you know it, it might be too much of a good thing.
Right. I definitely like the idea of having a sousaphone and playing it once or twice a year, and having the sickest bass lines ever. That being said, I just don't know that's ever going to happen because I just don't want that thing on me.
Yeah, that's another factor to consider. I don't think I have the raw strength to actually stand up and move around with the sousaphone.
I mean, you can do it. It's just everyone that I know that's played sousaphone, for into their adult life, if not earlier, their shoulders aren't the same height.
Oh dear.
And it's just that doesn't sound cool to me.
No.
Does that sound fun to you?
It doesn't sound particularly fun, no.
I mean, just thinking about let's say that I could get a sousaphone that I wanted, let's say $2,000, which probably, probably a little bit more than that for a vintage Con that I'd like what Mystery Jeffrey has. But in that case, that price, let's assume that we're making $200 per gig, which especially on the sousaphone, I think those are a little more like $100 gigs, which is fine.
Right. That's fine.
But if it's $200 gigs, that still means you have to play 10 of those gigs to make back the money from that instrument. That's pretending like you didn't drive there and put wear and tear on your car or anything like that. And I just kind of see my shoulders slowly just changing height as that equation goes,
Yeah.
And I just don't like that idea.
Okay. All right.
But
back off the sousaphone purchases.
If a sousaphone falls into my lap at a price that I'm interested in, I will almost certainly just buy it immediately.
Oh, absolutely.
I
would love to be a sousaphone person.
If there is a sousaphone that I like that comes up for under $1,000 probably, other than the fact that I have to store it somewhere, which is I have the room right now, but my office is so crowded, it wouldn't be able to stay in my office. When I had Mystery Jeffrey's Con in my office, I had it in there for a while, and it was super fun to play. Also, I couldn't stand up in here and play it. I have pretty traditional low ceilings.
Right.
And so it's I could only sit in a stool, and it was a super big hassle. Even then, it's I'm, especially since that wasn't mine, whether it's mine or not, I'm not trying to dent it. But, I'm looking at the fan, just make sure the fan's off just in case I do hit it. But I don't want to, I'm hoping that I don't hit it. It just wasn't really that much fun in my current living situation. And if it's not to take out in the world, if it's only to play at home, I got to have, 10-foot ceilings at least. So and just like a lot of a large layout in general, because those are hard to store.
They are. They can take up space.
So that's definitely something to consider. I would say I'd be surprised if I never owned a sousaphone. It just is. It's still finding me.
You're waiting for the right one to come along.
Right.
And that's okay.
So yeah, a lot of things on the table. I don't know that there's a clear-cut answer. I don't. This is your time to chime in and say we've got it figured out, Zach.
Well, I sure don't. I think we're gonna have to sit here and wait a little bit on it.
But yeah, I mean, nothing has to be done urgently. And at the end of the day, it's like any of those things would be fun. Let's see. Fly or Die bass trombone solo. I think we've all seen that. Have you not seen it, Connor?
I haven't seen it. No.
Oh, come on, Connor. You got to get on the internet more often.
What is it? I'm on the internet.
It's a very exciting bass trombone solo that I would say is viral, not outside of trombone circles necessarily.
This is a regular famous bass trombone solo?
It's a relatively new one. Like, I want to say this video came out like 6 years ago. I'm not really sure off the top of my head.
Wow, I need to get with it. I'm out of touch. 6 years ago?
5 years ago, 1.6 million views.
Wow. So yeah, the question there is like, are there 1.6 million bass trombone players?
No.
Around? I doubt it. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't think so.
That's a lot of people to be
so,
looking at a solo.
Yes, I would like to play something like that, which maybe that's the argument for getting a new bass trombone.
Yes, you have to fly or die.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, anything can be played on any instrument. With my current bass trombone, I'm not super interested in playing something like that. I like my bass trombone for what it is, but there are certain things from going in between no valves, one valve, and two valve that
it's tricky.
Are a little more frustrating than it is on other instruments. And I think, I was talking about this on my gig on Sunday with the trombone player, and he was talking about how he'll have to remain nameless, but because he is a Bach artist and was telling me about how he liked playing his Shire's bass trombone because it was easier to play when he had to play it.
Uh-huh.
And I think that's the thing. Like, when I've been really after it on my bass trombone, I feel like it can do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when I lived in Chicago, it was probably like the best I was playing bass trombone, because for whatever reason, that's where the need was. So I was playing a good amount of bass trombone. It just was what it was. If you need, when you move to a new city and you have 0 gigs and someone says, hey, can you do this? And you own that instrument and can play it somewhat well, you say yes. And then you say yes to the next one. It's not like I was turning down tenor trombone or tuba gigs to play bass trombone gigs while I lived in Chicago.
There's just a lot of bass trombone.
There's just that's what they needed. So that's what I ended up playing, and that's probably when I was like the strongest on that instrument. And at the end of the day, it was pretty easy to play then. I kind of dialed it in, but I feel like it took work. And once I did that work, it was great. But I'm currently not really doing that work. I mean, I play it most days. Mm-hmm. Like, I did play it today. I did play it yesterday. So it's not like I'm sitting on the stand and never using it. But it's hard to kind of have all of that together. Speaking of bass trombone, Elvis just joined.
Hey.
Hello, Elvis. Maybe Elvis can give us the right path for this. Elvis, we previously talked about how I basically made the decision, a little while ago. Over the last few months, I've decided that I was going to buy a Shire's bass trombone, probably at the end of this summer. And now I'm having second thoughts and thinking that I should wait a little bit longer and either buy a contrabass trombone or maybe get a bass trumpet, because I already have a bass trombone, and I don't intend on selling that bass trombone to get a Shire's, although there is probably an argument for that as well.
There is.
It's hard every time, or not every time, because I've sold 2 instruments. That's definitely another topic. Should you sell instruments? And unfortunately, the answer is probably yes.
Yeah.
And as one of the beneficiaries of me selling a trombone, that's easy for you to say.
Yeah, I say, yeah, sell them. I love it. I'll take it.
Right. So, when I was in high school, I got a custom Edwards small bore. This is probably somewhat well documented, but I sold it to Connor, and I sleep okay at night. Actually, not perfectly at night, but it's not because of this trombone. But I do miss it. Connor and I often joke that he can't sell it, that he has to sell it back to me, or he can't sell it to anybody.
That's true.
So that's one, I always joke about that. That's the one that got away.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like the idea of thinking about that. So we've got a question from Nolan. How do you get used to the trombone slide positions? I just started bass trombone for jazz, and I'm struggling with getting used to slide positions and staying in tune.
Ooh, that's tough.
It just takes time. I mean, that's essentially what my avenue into trombone land was. I didn't play trombone at all, and then when I was a sophomore in high school, I wanted to play in jazz band. I played in jazz band on drum set in middle school, but let's just say I was not good enough to do that in high school. So if I wanted to play in jazz band, it basically had to be on a trombone. That was the closest instrument I could get. So it takes time. What really helped me was just playing with drones a lot, just super slow scales, ba, da, and just finding it and not moving on to the next note until you've gotten it. And it's perfectly in tune. So that's what I would say. One of my, I had a jazz trumpet teacher, he's a jazz trumpet player, but he's teaching me jazz lessons. And I remember him burning a CD of just 3 minutes per key. And he was just just play your major scales up and down. And so that's what really helped me. I mean, it still takes some time, but that's my best advice. Because I think for all of us, it takes time, but it sounds like you probably are starting trombone later than everyone else around you, and it seems like they've just had it figured out, and I probably would say that that's probably not the case. You're just a step behind, but that doesn't mean you can't get to where they are or even past them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say, just to add on to it, getting used to the slide positions and staying in tune, it's no matter how advanced of a trombone player you claim to be in your life, you're still just more sophisticated versions of that for the rest of your life. We're still fine-tuning where the slide positions are, and we're still finding ways to play in tune. So the bad news is that's never going away.
Right, and at the end of the day, sometimes you feel like it's never gotten better because your ears keep getting better.
Right.
And so
that's another issue too.
But yeah, I would just say a lot of drone practice. That's the best thing that helped me. And at the end of the day, intonation's relative. You just do the best you can. Mm-hmm. To answer Elvis's questions, are you looking at a Shire's Custom or Q Series? Looking at a Shire's Custom. I feel like, although the Q Series, I do recommend them for a lot of people, I feel like the Q Series would not be enough of an increase in some ways compared to the Bach 50 that I already have. And I hate saying upgrade. We've said that word already a few times, but especially for, this isn't directed towards Elvis, but to some of the maybe less experienced viewers and things, I think that word upgrade gets thrown around too much. I would say just different is a better word sometimes, in thinking that, that this is a clear upgrade. Because I just spent 5 times more on the euphonium that I just got than the previous one I had. And you know what? It is a better instrument. In most ways, it is an upgrade. And very few would argue that it's not an upgrade, but there are downsides. It's heavier, that it's more awkward to hold. It has a medium shank, which is kind of annoying. It's there are these differences that may not be clear upgrades. And then Elvis also says, did that pop up? Yeah. And if contrabass or bass trumpet route, what models are you looking at? I'm pretty sure the way that I would go in that for both of those, I mean, obviously I haven't purchased it yet, would be either an Alexander bass trumpet or a Marcus Lecter Contra bass trombone. those to me seem to be things that I could potentially afford and not, and I would still be thinking about, are they going to, make their money back, which the answer is probably not, but are not, like a Tyne Contra being 20 grand is cool. I hear they're really nice. I mean, I played 3 different Tyne Contras. I liked all of them, but at the end of the day, 20 grand is a lot, and I don't think that it's really hard to justify that compared to a still very expensive $10,000 bass trombone. How about I buy a soprano saxophone? No.
It's never too late to start, Zach.
I mean, I don't think we need to go down the rabbit hole of reed instruments. I think we're pretty set on the brass rat at this point. I will say that I'm not sure that I never buy a trumpet or a French horn.
Oh, no.
But I don't think that that's super soon. I guess I already have a trumpet, but thinking like a more professional trumpet.
A different trumpet.
A different trumpet. Well, I think it's fair to say with this scenario, not everything moves on that trumpet.
I see. So you want all the moving parts to move.
I want all the moving parts to move, and I could get it moving, and then I could also, like it doesn't have proper thumb rings and saddles and, or pinky ring and saddle, whatever you want to say. But probably not worth investing that into that instrument. But yes, so that's something that maybe would happen at some point. But I think that that's pretty far down the line as well. Double reed instruments, definitely not. Those are way too complicated for my brain.
Reeds.
I like them from a distance.
The bassoon, I will say, kind of back to the band director question that was earlier. When I took my flute double reed tech class, I loved playing the bassoon. Bassoon was fun to the point that they were going to let me play in like the concert band on bassoon while I was student teaching, because like they had like the wind ensemble at school, and there was another band, and it was just going to be like every day of the week I was going to be coming back from student teaching to school and playing in an ensemble, so I'm just saying no. But if I could switch to a reed instrument, it would definitely be the bassoon. It honks really low, it's fun to play.
Not the contrabassoon? You wouldn't just go, full send?
I mean, if someone's got a contrabassoon for me to play, I'm playing it. Yeah, we're getting on the bandwagon. That was always the coolest thing. I love the contrabassoon too. That was fun because sometimes they would put the contrabassoon like right in front of us in the orchestra, and you could like watch them getting it out, and it was like bigger than the person playing it, and then and it just like shakes. It's like one of those like, it's just cool. Like the frequency of the note they're playing is just like so slow to the point that you can like feel the oscillations of it. It's like it was an amazing thing to witness. I love the contrabassoon. All bassoons.
Yeah, I mean I like those instruments as well. I've tried some of the other low woodwind. I mean, I would imagine Connor has a more wide experience. Not that it's crazy wide or anything, but
not a semester wide.
Yeah, but I've definitely dabbled. You leave enough band kids in a high school band room with no supervision, and somebody's going to get out the contrabassoon or contrabass clarinet, and I'm going to play it. That's just how it's going to go. Mm-hmm. Should that be going on? No, but did it happen? Yeah. I don't think I was able to make a sound.
I remember you're unlocking a bunch of memories now. I definitely took the bass clarinet home a lot in high school and messed around with it.
Yeah.
When I was not supposed to. What I loved, my favorite thing to listen to try to play, was that that crazy Bob Minzer solo bass clarinet video that's on YouTube. It's from a Jocko live performance. I don't know. I can't cite like the year or like anything significant about it. I know that later in the set they played Donnelly together, and that's cool. But there was like a couple little I would just listen to that and I was like, I'm gonna do it. But
yeah.
I could only play like 3 notes, and I was like, okay, this is not working.
There are a few more in Donnelly.
Yeah, there are.
Elvis says, I would say for practical sakes, the bass trombone is more justified, assuming you find one that works. It will by default have more gigs, and you'll feel better when modeling / teaching bass trombone. And at the end of the day, I know that you're right. I know that is the correct statement. Yeah, I know that it's right. I know that I should get, if I'm going to get anything. I guess there is another argument too in there. What about a third tuba?
Is there a tuba you don't have?
Oh, there's always a tuba I don't have. Can you rephrase your question?
I shouldn't have asked that. Is there like a type of tuba, like E flat tuba, things like that? Like, do you have an E flat tuba?
I don't have an E flat tuba. I have an F and a C tuba, and the way that I would describe it to a non-tubist, obviously you understand things about tubas, but even some of our tuba viewers who are maybe a little less experienced and have only played B flat tuba maybe haven't thought about it in these sorts of ways. But I've got a 6/4 C tuba. I think you might be able to. You can't really see it behind me, but it's back there. I promise. I haven't sold it yet. But I have a very large contrabass tuba, a C tuba. It's big. It's great for playing in 80-person orchestras, things like that. You can play it in smaller groups. I played it this Sunday at a church with only 4 other brass players and a brass quintet, and it's not like I, dominated everything and everyone was like, that's way too loud. I felt like I had to play pretty soft, but at the end of the day, I made it work. So that's definitely of a concern. That's so big and it's not useful in all scenarios. And then I have my F tuba. Sorry, my hands are out of frame, but now they're so close that the analogy doesn't make sense. But the F tuba that I have is a 4/4 instrument technically, but I would say it's on the small side. And what it's good for, it's great for. Playing the French tuba things, all of that sort of stuff. But then when I have to play it in a brass quintet, it's it's okay. I can make it work, but there are certain pieces that expose issues that I think, you can always, a bad craftsperson blames the tools. I understand that. But I think any professional tuba player would probably say that my F tuba is not the greatest instrument for a brass quintet.
I see.
And a lot of professionals play C, and some, at the end of the day, it kind of depends on who you're playing with and how they're playing. When I was playing in a brass quintet at Northwestern, one of the things that Rex Martin, who is my quintet coach, also tuba teacher, I talked to him about it, and he was like, well, I think it depends on, what sounds the trumpet players are making. Are they making a really big orchestral sound, or are they making, not a big orchestral sound? And should they, one thing is what they're doing and what they should be doing may not be the same. But when you see a lot of orchestral brass quintet groups, a lot of times the tuba player is playing a 6/4 C tuba. That's I would say that's pretty common for a lot of the literature that's played, which that's fine if that works. And I'm not saying it doesn't work, and I've done it, and it's like even my gig on Sunday, it's like I had to play pretty high on my C tuba when it was fine. But there was a moment in time where I was like, I'll just bring my F. And that's just like, I'm not going to do that. It's silly. But to answer your question, it's like I definitely could have something in the middle. And what that in the middle is would depend on what my goals are for it, what I see myself using it for. And at the end of the day, any tuba basically can play anything. That's more or less the reality, because the only limiting factor, technically speaking, is low range on a brass instrument.
I see.
And
notes that are available.
And every key of tuba can play off the piano, assuming it has enough valves. If you're playing a 5-valve tuba, B flat, C, E flat, or F, it can play lower notes than what's on the piano. So there's not really a situation where you look at a piece of music and it's like, well, I can't play that on this instrument. I have to play it on this instrument. What it usually looks like is this won't sound as good on this instrument, but it'll sound better on this one. So juggling that, I think a large F tuba would be great. I think a small C tuba would be great, or smaller, maybe not small, but an E flat tuba is in there also. I've always wanted to get an E flat tuba and a B flat tuba for that matter, but not that there's a huge learning curve or relearning curve, but those aren't quite as plug and go sort of instruments for me at this point. And I don't really see a lot of scenarios where I take a B flat tuba out of the house.
Right.
I'd like to have one for teaching and for, making videos and things like that, but I don't know that unless I get a really nice, large, B-flat tuba that I would play on, Shostakovich or Prokofiev or something along those lines, some big, German or Russian thing. I don't think that I'm, if I'm just getting a Miraphone 186 or something, I don't think that leaves the house. So, yeah, that's another thing. It's like I could get a third tuba, which a lot of people would, a lot of people would say that I should get a third tuba because it's like how many trombones are behind me, and there's two tubas, which I know, well, with me I only have two tubas, but, it might be time to get another one.
Maybe.
Let's see. So, do you have any suggestions for grade 1 tuba quartets? Honestly, I don't really. The best, I really don't have anything super helpful for that. There's really not a whole lot of literature, and like even when I was conducting one of the tuba euphonium ensembles at the University of North Texas, and my method was standing in the the little closet with all the music and just looking at the scores for hours until I found something. So I don't really have a lot of helpful information, I'm sorry. Elvis says, if I had the money, I'd buy a screw bell for my Shires and a bonnet cut case, then a contra one day. That's partially why I'm thinking Shires too, is because I want a cut bell, and I'm not going to cut the bell on my Bach 50. So, yeah, Elvis is definitely not wrong that a Shires bass is probably the most practical of the bass trumpet, bass trombone, and contrabass trombone realm. There's probably a stronger, if we're going that route of what I really should be doing, is probably getting a third tuba. I think if we're being the most practical, but those are also, assuming not getting a tine contra, that's probably the most expensive thing, depending on exactly what I get and if I get it used or whatever. So that's why it's always so unappealing. Mm-hmm. Should get a really big rotary B-flat tuba. I've definitely thought about it. There are definitely a couple from Miraphone, the Hagen and the Siegfried, is that the other one? That are really, really nice. So medium-sized C or large E-flat could bridge the gap nicely. Yeah, I definitely think so. Either of those things or a large F, especially, thinking like a 2250 F tuba is kind of one that I've always had some eyes for, and I've even played a recital on one and liked what I heard. So that's definitely an instrument that I would consider getting. But any of those sorts of things, a medium-sized C, or maybe even a small C, like a Rudy Meinl 3/4 C tuba, that's a great little tuba. I mean, it's not that small, but it's a great tuba that would kind of fit that mold. But yeah, a lot of questions. And, maybe, if everybody just keeps watching all of the Low Brass U videos, maybe we'll just get them all this year. But that's probably not the way that it's going to go. Do you have any closing thoughts, Connor? Probably should call it there.
No closing thoughts. A lot of factors to play in here. I'm still firmly in Camp Sousaphone, despite what we might have said about our risk of shoulder injury. I think maybe we can find some sort of like ergonomic attachment or something that might help us out with the.
Maybe I could hang it from the ceiling.
Yes, like kind of like isn't it like a trumpet player who did a clinic where they would like hang a trumpet from a string and blow into it? Why not do that? Or like I don't know, like let's like you could get like those like movable, like I had one of those in college. I had a closet rail. There was like it was like attached to like little wheels, and it wasn't like an actual closet. It was just like a clothing rack that I could move around with my stuff. Mm-hmm. Why can't we get a Sousaphone rack?
Yeah, you're asking the tough questions.
Put some like rubber, like all-terrain, like some tires on there, and make it kind of omnidirectional.
Yeah.
It could be dangerous.
Yeah, there are some options.
That's my closing thought.
Yeah.
Let's make the all-terrain Sousaphone.
Yeah.
Make it a reality.
Well, we'll call it there, and we'll see everyone next week. We're good for next week, right, Connor?
We're good for next week.
Awesome. So we'll do the same bat time, same bat channel, and we'll see you then.
That works for me.